These 3 builds are going to help you complete all 50 waves in the Legend Onslaught mode. For the Titan build, it's good for everything: boss kills, boss damage, getting tons of woven mail, getting tons of melee damage. And for the Hunter, it is extremely good for crowd control. You are going to get infinite amounts of super energy, which will suppress and weaken targets. And you're also going to help your teammates deal with the Tormentor with ease. And lastly, for the Warlock, you're mainly going to be spamming your well. You're going to be causing massive ignitions when getting kills inside of the well. And you're also going to be spamming your well like it's no other. So if any of these builds caught your interest, all of these 3 builds will be in the link in the description. So without further ado, let's get right into it. Let's first start on the Titan. For the exotic, be sure to go for Synthoceps. And I'm pretty sure you Titan mains out there are curious to know, why am I not running Worm Gods? Isn't Worm Gods better than Synthoceps? Yes, it is, but with Worm Gods, you're gonna have to get melee kills, and that takes really forever. But with Synthoceps, all you would have to do is be surrounded by 3 or more enemies to proc the perk. So it's much easier getting the buff rather than going for melee kills every time. So here's what Synthoceps does. Whenever you're within 15 meters of 3 or more enemies, it would grant this perk called Bionic Enhancements buff for 8 seconds. Once you proc the perk, it would give you 35 reload and also handling. And also, it would give you a 50% increased damage to your super. And lastly, it will increase your melee damage up to 165%. And that's another thing as well. Synthoceps also buffs your super, but Worm Gods doesn't. Now let's head to the Beserker subclass. For the abilities, you can choose either or from your class ability, but for me, I chose to put Rally Barricade. For the Strand Grenade, go for Grapple for an extra melee hit, and also whenever you get that grapple melee hit, it will unravel targets. Now onto the aspects. The first aspect, be sure to go for Into the Fray. Destroying a Tangle or casting your super grants woven mail to nearby allies. And whenever you have woven mail, your melee regeneration rate is increased. And whenever you proc woven mail, you are going to be getting a 45% damage reduction towards enemies. The next aspect will enhance your melee damage, and it's called the Banner of War. Defeat a target with a melee attack, finisher, or a sword to raise a Banner of War that pulses with energy, periodically healing nearby allies and also increasing melee and sword damage. Targets defeated by you and nearby allies will charge the banner, increasing the spread of its pulses. And we're mostly going to be either getting melee kills or finishers to proc this aspect. So in total, we are going to be having 4 fragments, and let me show you guys what I was running. For the first fragment, I'm running Thread of Generation. Dealing damage grants grenade energy, but you would get -10 discipline. The second fragment is Thread of Fury. Damaging targets with a tangle grants melee energy, but you would get -10 strength. The third fragment is Thread of Warding. Picking up an Orb of Power grants woven mail, but you would get -10 resilience. Lastly is Thread of Transmutation. While you have woven mail, Weapon Final Blows creates a tangle, but you would get +10 strength. So now we have 2 ways to get a tangle, 1 from our weapons and 2 from our abilities. Now onto the weapons. For the kinetic weapon, I'm using this strand shotgun called the Swordbreaker. And for the perks I do recommend going for is on the 3rd column called Pugilist. Final blows with this weapon generate improved melee energy. Dealing melee damage briefly improves this weapon's handling. And for the 4th perk column, go for 1-2 punch. Hitting a target with nearly every pellet in a shot increases melee damage for a short duration. And what's cool about the shotgun is the origin trait called the Cursed Thrall. After defeating a target with a melee attack, final blows with this weapon cause targets to explode for a short duration. Because of course in this build we are getting tons of melee kills, so we're gonna proc this origin trait non-stop. And of course this is a strand weapon, so for the seasonal artifact mods we can be able to stun anti-barrier champions because of this one called Unraveling Orbs. Picking up an Orb of Power grants strand weapons unraveling rounds. Now onto the energy weapon. I am using the solar hand cannon called the Zaouli's Bane. And here's what you need to be running for the perks. On the 3rd column, go for explosive payload. Projectiles create an area of effect detonation on impact, and it would also improve reloading. On the 4th column, go for incandescent. Defeating a target spreads a longer lasting scorch to those nearby. And lastly, for the origin trait, here's what it does. It's called Runneth Over. Reloading near allies overflows the magazine. I wanted to put this hand cannon just because of the seasonal artifact mods. On the 2nd column is Kindling Trigger. Beserker, Radiant causes solar weapons to apply Scorch to unscorched combatants, and on the third column is Flint Striker. Rapid solar weapon precision hits and rapid solar weapon final blows grants Radiant, and the most broken one for this hand cannon is on the fifth column called Rays of Precision. While Radiant, solar precision final blows causes combatants to ignite. So with those artifacts, this hand cannon will dominate ad clearing. And you're also going to be stunning unstops because we are causing ignitions, and 2, there is unstoppable hand cannon in the seasonal artifacts. And for the power weapon, I chose to put Tractor Cannon because this weapon emits a powerful impulse that pushes enemies away, suppresses their abilities, and makes them more vulnerable to all incoming damage. If you do have the catalyst, all it will do is that it will increase your ammo reserves. So originally it would be 4 in the mag, and now it is 7 in the mag. You can stun overload champions because we are suppressing targets with this Tractor Cannon. And for the stats, I do recommend going for Discipline. It will decrease the cooldown of your grenades, and also Resilience because 1, we are on Titan, so it would 1, reduce the cooldown of your class ability, and it would also give us a 30% damage reduction if we have tier 10 Resilience. And here are the armor mods that I was using for this build. The main ones I do want to mention is on the gauntlet called Void Dexterity. Faster ready and sow speed for void weapons because the Tractor Cannon has 35 handling, so it's going to take a while for you to pull it out. So by having this mod, it would help us swap to the Tractor Cannon faster. And also for the mark, I am using Special Finisher. Whenever we consume 3 stacks of armor charges, it would give me and my teammates special ammo. And for the helmet, I am using Solar/Strand Dual Siphon, so it will combine Solar and Strand Siphon into one. And now let's head to the second build, and is on the Hunter. For the boots, go for Orpheus Rig. It will provide ability energy for each target tethered by Deadfall anchors. So Deadfall returns ability energy per enemy tethered. So it would give you 10% grenade, melee, and class ability energy. And your main goal is of course to tether as many targets as possible to receive a lot of super energy. For the Nightstalker subclass, for the super, go for Shadow Shot Deadfall because it would 1, suppress targets, in which case stuns overload champions, and 2, it will weaken them as well. For the abilities, go for Gambler's Dodge for your class ability because whenever you dodge near an enemy, it would give you your melee back. Now for the Void Grenade, be sure to go for Vortex Grenade because this one's extremely good for clearing out a pile of ads. And for the aspects, go for Trapper's Ambush. Activate Quickfall to spend your melee charge and dive to the ground, creating a large smoke cloud on impact. Targets caught in the cloud are weakened and allies are made invisible. Your smoke bomb makes nearby allies invisible when it attaches to nearby surfaces or targets. The next aspect I put is Vanishing Step. Dodging makes you invisible. Same thing as the other aspect, I just put this one just to survive longer. So in total, we are going to be having 4 fragments, and here's what you need to be running. For the first fragment, go for Echo of Reprisal. Final blows when surrounded by combatants grants super energy. The next fragment is Echo of Expulsion. Void ability final blows causes targets to explode, and it would give you plus 10 intellect. This also does affect your super as well, so if they do get tethered and you were to kill them, they will explode. Your third fragment is Echo of Starvation. Picking up an Orb of Power or a Void Breach grants Devour, but you would get minus 10 recovery. So whenever you pick up a Void Breach, it will give you class ability energy. A final fragment, be sure to go for Echo of Harvest. Defeating weakened targets creates an Orb of Power and also a Void Breach, but you would get minus 10 intellect. So you can weaken targets with your super or your melee ability. For the kinetic weapon, I'm using the Strand Fusion Rifle called the Scatter Signal. And on the third column, be sure to go for Slice. Casting your class ability allows this weapon to sever targets on hit for a brief duration up to a maximum number of targets. And on the fourth column, be sure to go for Controlled Burst. Landing every shot in a burst grants this weapon increased damage and reduce the charge time for an improved duration. And you can also proc this perk 2 whenever you get a kill. And for the energy weapon, I'm using the solar auto rifle called the Summoner. Yes, I do know this is a trials weapon, so I'll give you an alternative version of it once I'm done discussing this weapon. For the third column, be sure to go for Heal Clip. Reloading shortly after dealing a final blow grants cure to you and nearby allies. And for the fourth column, go for Incandescent. What's also cool about this auto rifle is the origin trait called Wildcard. Long story short, whenever you kill an enemy, you would have a chance to drop a Telestal Orb. And the other weapon that I do recommend you going for for is the Darkest Before. The perks are the same thing as the Summoner, so go for these perks as well. And for the power weapon, be sure to go for this Void Bow called the Leviathan's Breath. Here's why. So whenever we deal with a Tormentor, they're usually gonna beat us up, and most likely we're gonna wipe. So by having the Leviathan's Breath, we are going to be able to stun lock the Tormentor, just to give us a bit more time to deal damage to him. And here's what it does. It would fire a massive heavy bolt that stuns unshielded combatants, and it's also strong against unstopped champions. The weapon perk for this bow is called Leviathan's Sigh. When fully drawn, the bolt creates a large concussive blast that knocks combatants back and makes them volatile. And lastly, if you do have the catalyst, here's what it does. The draw time decreases after every precision hit, and it would also maximize your quiver size. Now let's head to the stats. I do recommend going for intellect if you do want to take full advantage of your super ability cooldown. And your second stat, be sure to go for resilience. And here are the armor mods that I was using for this build if you guys are interested. The main one I do want to mention is that I am using elemental charge, so whenever we collect a void breach, we would have an escalating chance to give us an armor charge. And here are the artifact mods if you guys are interested. And lastly, onto the Warlock. For the exotic armor piece, I am using Phoenix Protocol. Kills and assists you make while standing in your Well of Radiance returns a super energy, which will allow you to spam your wells non-stop. For the Dawnblade subclass, of course, for your super ability, go for Well of Radiance. For the abilities, for your class ability, go for Healing Rift, and for your Solar Grenade, go for Healing Grenade. Onto the aspects, go for Touch of Flame. It will improve the strength of cure and restoration effects applied, so we would have ×2 restoration. And for the second aspect, go for Icarus Dash to give you that mid-air dodge. And also, whenever you get rapid kills with your super or your weapons, it will cure you. Now onto the fragments. For the first one, go for Ember of Mercy. When you revive an ally, you and your other nearby allies gain restoration, and also whenever you pick up a fire sprite, it will grant restoration, but you will get +10 resilience. The second one is Ember of Combustion. Final blows with your solar super causes targets to ignite and creates a fire sprite, and you would also get +10 strength. For the third fragment, go for Ember of Eruption. Your solar ignition to have increased area of effect, and you would get +10 strength. Lastly, for your fragments, go for Ember of Empyrean. Solar weapon or ability final blows extend the duration of restoration and radiant effects applied to you, but you would get -10 resilience. For the weapons, I am using Scatter Signal for the kinetic weapon, and for the energy weapon, I am using Zaouli's Bane. And for the power weapon, I am using this exotic solar rocket launcher called the Dragon's Breath. Rockets embedded themselves in struck targets and periodically eject incendiary fuel that inflicts Scorch. The longer this weapon goes without firing, the more fuel the next rocket contains. The perk for this rocket launcher is High Octane. Igniting nearby targets partially replenishes fuel. This weapon refuels itself from reserves upon gaining maximum fuel. And if you do have the catalyst, here's what it does. This weapon replenishes its fuel faster, and also whenever you defeat targets with this weapon, it would cause them to periodically drop a fire sprite. And here are the artifact mods if you guys are interested. And for the stats, I do recommend going for intellect to reduce your super ability cooldown. And for your second stat, go for resilience. And here are the armor mods that I was using for this build. And the mod that I do want to mention is on the helmet called Power Preservation. Your super final blows creates an extra orb of power for your allies. So these builds will help you get to that wave 50 if you guys are struggling when playing the new Legend Onslaught mode. If you guys did enjoy and found this informative, be sure to hit that like button and also subscribe. I hope you guys have a good rest of your day, evening, or afternoon. Take care and peace. Join the Discord!